All right, so let's keep moving on. I saw this quote and I thought this was somewhat compelling. Cybersecurity is not a full-time job; it's a dozen full-time jobs, basically. There's so many aspects, so much new information. It's changing so rapidly, so much individual specialization between just the strategy piece, between the nuts and bolts, the physical checks, pen testing, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why this is such a big animal and why that quote is sort of compelling. So this kind of leads us into a discussion and kind of a review around tools. So I wanted to start kind of at a basic level. These are all absolute critical tools. I'm sure everybody on this call has these in one way, shape, or form. Starting with obviously a firewall and a VPN. A lot of the ones have, certainly the ones that we deploy have, built-in intrusion detection and some other services available to them. I'm sure everyone on the call has antivirus, spam filtering, of course, and some means of a backup. However, the backup is probably one area and a technology that over the last 15 years has changed considerably. I still come across a lot of businesses that are on older backup technology, whether it's just what their internal or external IT people are comfortable with, or if it's a pricing scenario. Some of the older technologies are cheaper, a bit cheaper, but I guess it all depends on what your expectations are for recovering. You know, like the system that we use is a true business continuity solution that fire, flood, building implodes, etc. We can have our clients back up and running, within an hour. Whereas a lot of the older technologies, you're talking about days for recovery. But these are absolutely critical. Again, I'm sure everybody has these in place. But now, if we move up a level, kind of, I'll call these mid-level. 3 years ago, these were probably more advanced tools, but now I'm kind of saying these are must-haves. So starting out with, we've already brought it up, multi-factor authentication. And it comes in a variety of ways that you can accomplish pretty much the same thing. So some of the solutions will basically text you a code or email you a code. There's lots of code generators out there. The Google code generator is another one that just constantly is changing a code that you use and have to plug in. So obviously, with all of these, it's the secondary authentication beyond just putting in an ID and a password. So you have to enter this code in. So if, God forbid, a hacker does have access to your ID and password, with this extra authentication mode, they're not going to have access to these things. And I also mentioned fob there too. So that's literally a physical kind of device that you plug into, let's say, a USB port that kind of does the same thing as an extra level of authentication. So, but these are absolutely necessary for Microsoft 365. It is the, if not biggest, probably second biggest target amongst cyber criminals, Microsoft 365, just because so many people are using it and that there's lots that they can do if they do get access to it. And it's easy to trick people. They're familiar with like the Microsoft login interface, so they're going to replicate what that looks like and try and trick people that way. The next is DNS filtering and phishing protection. So this one, also lots of products coming up around this too. But basically what it's doing, the majority of phishing protection software is going to protect against, links that might come in an email that will get through the spam filter, and protect people if they click on a link. The one that we use is the Cisco product, and whether a link comes in an email to one of your people or they're on a web page and click on a link, it'll actually check those links and analyze those links against a known database and be looking for like malicious code and whatnot, and it'll basically deny access for your people. Security awareness training. I'm sure most people on this call, probably in one way, shape, or form, have already done something like this. There's lots of products coming out for this as well. KnowBe4 is a pretty popular one. So it's both the awareness training, video on-demand, video-based training for your people to make them more aware and be able to identify these situations, as well as phishing simulations. So, sending test emails to your people and seeing how many people they can fool. And lastly is dark web monitoring, which is monitoring the dark web to see if any of your people's ID and password combinations happen to show up for sale. It's usually one of the first things that happen once you get breached. So again, these ones here, I'm saying they're must-have. Even the dark web monitoring, all of these items here are definitely a part of our service. So now we'll move on to the advanced, and I'm putting the word advanced in quotes because they're not as advanced anymore. And a few years ago, again, these would have been like super high level tools that very, very few organizations have been using. But now we're getting more to the should have. And this is also an area that's got a whole bunch of acronyms. And another reason why I wanted to do this, I'm getting completely, spammed with, security vendors trying to sell me and our company on these products. I'm sure some people on this call have seen these acronyms as well: EDR, XDR, MDR, as it relates to security. So, but let's break these down. We'll start with EDR. So it stands for Endpoint Detection and Response. And it's kind of a complementary service to antivirus. So basically, antivirus is looking at a known database of virus definitions. So as new viruses come out and are detected, that information goes into this database. That database gets downloaded into your antivirus software, and the antivirus tool is checking all the emails to see if any of that code or whatnot happens to show up. Where EDR comes in is basically complementing that. So it's not checking necessarily against a known database of code. It's basically looking at behaviors on the machine. It's using artificial intelligence to see what kind of activity is actually going on in that machine. Is it typical of what a user might be doing? Or are we starting to notice things that might be more typical of what a hacker or somebody from an outsider might be doing on a machine? And it's going to set off an alert. It'll maybe do some automated responses to things that it deems as a threat. It also may send alerts out that will have suggested activities that you can take or actions that you can take. So I put on here, it's protecting against what's called dwell time. So dwell time is that time I showed you in the chart before. These hackers get in and they're not just, encrypting everything immediately. They're getting in, they're looking around, they're doing intel. All of that is considered what we call dwell time. So on average, that dwell time between somebody detecting that somebody has gotten in there and responding to it, or them just go ahead and hitting the button on that encryption software, is about 56 days on average. So just to further illustrate endpoint detection and response, so this protect area, that's basically where antivirus lives. And again, it's signature based. It's looking for certain signatures and codes, within an email or within a piece of software. And then the detect phase, post-infection, that's really where the endpoint detection and response comes in. It's going to detect after somebody has actually gotten into your systems. Now, I can't, some of these numbers, I don't know, to me don't look right, but I guess they are, that they're saying roughly, let's call it, antivirus is about 60% accurate at stopping things. So the EDR is going to cover off on that, let's call it extra 40%. So that's the EDR. The next one is XDR. So it's somewhat related. The X just stands for extended. So EDR, endpoint detection, is just that, on endpoint. So your computers, your laptops, your servers. XDR extends that to other endpoints and network devices. So your switches, your routers, your wireless, your firewalls, etc. Again, doing the same thing, looking for atypical behavior and alerting and or taking remediation upon that. And so the last one here, MDR, stands for Managed Detection and Response. So whereas EDR and XDR are tools that we use, MDR is actually a service. So because lots of alerts and things like that are going to get set off, potentially false positives might be set off as well. So the MDR is basically going to be like a team of cybersecurity experts that are parsing through all this these data and alerts and whatnot, just to try and check against false positives or the converse to that. But there's also one extra advantage here looking at a human element. So we can only teach a machine so much about what is typical behavior. So adding this extra human element, they also might notice some trends and things like that that are also atypical and sound off an alarm. So the next ones here, again, another couple of acronyms, might be confusing if you've seen them before. The first one, SIEM, we call it SIEM or SIM, and SOC, which we say SOC. So these two services are somewhat related to SIEM service, that stands for Security Incident and Event Management. So basically, this is software that is doing deep analysis of logs, event logs within systems and devices across an entire network. And it's trying to piece together the information that's happening in these logs and piecing it together to see if any of it is starting to resemble any kind of a threat or an attack, or the potential of somebody that's already made an attack and is already inside the organization. This can be costly software, as well as costly to manage as well, because there's millions and millions of logs and events that are constantly generated across every machine that you might have. So you need somebody to be able to look at all these alerts and things like that that are coming up, because there will be a lot of false positives coming out of this software. So that's where the SOC service comes in, which stands for Security Operations Center. Again, somewhat similar to MDR, but slightly different. It's a 24/7 service. Again, it's a team of people that are analyzing all the alerts and things that come in from these tools, from the SIEM tools, also like the EDR and XDR tools as well. So again, SIEM is the tool and SOC would be that service. So again, I see we're not exactly sure where this is all going to shake out and how some of these products are going to blend together. But I think over time, these things that are probably a little bit more of the exception than the rule today are going to start becoming more commonplace in the years to come. But it's definitely just something, and these are services and tools you just want to talk to your IT people about. And get familiar with them and see if it's right for your organization.